Have you ever loved someone so much that the silence between you was louder than a storm? Imagine this: a train station, cold glass walls streaked with rain, and a woman waiting for a man she can't have. This isn't just a love story. It's the story of a goodbye that breaks you quietly, from the inside out. The rain had been falling since morning, a steady, cold drumming against the glass walls of the central station. It was one of those relentless city downpours that turns the world gray and blurry. People rushed past in a frantic dance, their umbrellas like black flowers blooming and closing in the storm. But she stood still, an island of calm in the chaos. Her name was Maya, and she was clutching her phone so tightly her knuckles were white, her eyes fixed on the empty, gleaming tracks. Maya had always hated goodbyes. She despised the finality, the drawn-out awkwardness, the forced smiles. But this was different. This was the kind of goodbye that tore through you silently, without a single word of anger, without a dramatic scene. It was a goodbye built on pure, unbreachable distance. Her phone screen suddenly lit up, casting a pale blue glow on her face. 3 words appeared. "I'm on my way." Just that. No heart emoji, which he used to send with every message. No promise of, "I'll see you soon." Just the simple, brutal truth from a man who wasn't supposed to love her, but did anyway. And a man she loved with every fiber of her being. His name was Ethan. He was brilliant, dedicated, and worked for her father. In the cutthroat world of her family's corporation, Ethan was my father's right-hand man, his most trusted protege. He was loyal, sharp, and bound by a contract stricter than any iron cage. A contract that explicitly forbade any personal or romantic relationships within the company, especially with the boss's daughter. It was a clause designed to protect the family, the business, and its interests. It was a clause designed to keep people like Ethan away from people like her. For an entire year, their love had been a secret rebellion. They had stolen minutes between grueling board meetings, finding sanctuary in forgotten corridors and empty conference rooms. They communicated through shared glances across crowded rooms, a language only they understood. Their love story was written in whispered dreams under the hazy glow of city lights, on rooftops overlooking a sleeping metropolis. Love had become their secret language, a beautiful, fragile thing spoken only in the shadows, away from the prying eyes of her world. But secrets, no matter how well kept, have a way of finding the light. And the truth had finally caught up to them. Her father, a man who missed nothing, found out. The discovery wasn't a loud explosion, but a cold, quiet declaration of war. He hadn't yelled or threatened. He had simply presented Ethan with a choice: his career, his future, the life he had worked so hard to build, or her. And Ethan, a man defined by his integrity and loyalty, had chosen honor. He had chosen to uphold his promise, his contract. He had chosen to walk away from her. A high-pitched screech echoed from down the tracks, the sound of an approaching train. It sounded less like an arrival and more like a warning, a final siren call. Maya's heart began to race, a frantic, painful rhythm against her ribs. It was a confusing mix of emotions. Half of her was filled with a wild, desperate hope that he might change his mind, that he would run to her and say it was all a mistake. The other half was suffocated by a cold, certain dread, knowing this was truly the end. And then she saw him. He stepped onto the platform, his dark coat soaked through, his hair plastered to his forehead by the rain. He stood there, silent and still, the bustling crowd parting around him as if he existed in his own pocket of time. The moment their eyes met across the platform, she knew. She didn't need him to say a word. His eyes, those deep, expressive eyes that had once held galaxies of love for her, now held a universe of pain. They said everything his words couldn't. "I love you. I will always love you, but I can't stay." A disembodied metallic voice blared from the overhead speakers, cutting through the thick air. Train 9 to Northwood, now boarding on Platform 3. Final call. Train 9 departing in 2 minutes. 2 minutes. 120 seconds to summarize a year of stolen moments, a lifetime of unspoken dreams. An eternity and a heartbeat, all at once. Every instinct in her screamed to run to him, to grab his hand, to beg him to forget everything. Her father, the company, the contract. She wanted to yell, "Let's just go. We can run away, start somewhere new, where no one knows our names, where we can just be us." But looking at his face, at the resolved set of his jaw, and the profound sadness in his eyes, she knew it was pointless. He had made his choice. Forcing him to break his code would only destroy the very man she loved. So, instead of begging, instead of crying, she did the hardest thing she had ever done. She smiled. It wasn't a real smile. It was the kind of smile you give when you re-shattering into a million pieces on the inside, but you refuse to let anyone see the cracks. It was a smile of acceptance, of sacrifice, of a love so deep it could let go. "Don't look back," she whispered, the words barely audible over the hiss of the train doors and the drumming rain. She wasn't sure if he even heard her, but she needed to say it. For him. For her. So he could leave without the weight of her grief pulling him back. He gave a single sharp nod. His gaze held hers for one last heart-stopping second, a final silent exchange of love and loss. Then he turned. With firm, deliberate steps, he boarded the train. She watched as his silhouette was swallowed by the carriage, disappearing into the anonymous crowd inside. The doors slid shut with a pneumatic hiss, sealing him away from her forever. With a lurch and a groan of metal on metal, the train began to move, slowly at first, then picking up speed until it was just a blur of lights vanishing into the storm. The train was gone. The platform was emptying. But the rain kept falling, washing the city clean. The world, indifferent to her pain, kept moving. Cars honked. People laughed. Life continued its relentless pace. But for Maya, standing alone in the cold, something had fundamentally shifted. Somewhere between the distant rumble of thunder and the constant low hum of the city, her heart finally stopped waiting. It didn't break loudly. It simply went quiet, accepting the hollow space where a beautiful, impossible love used to be. The love was real, but some stories, no matter how passionate, just aren't meant to have a happy ending. Days blurred into weeks, then months. For most, the city didn't pause for a broken heart. The cars still blared their horns, the deadlines at work still loomed, and strangers still laughed in cafes as if the world hadn't completely shattered. But for Maya, everything, absolutely everything, had changed. The city itself had become a ghost. She still took the same route to work. It was a habit she couldn't break, a daily pilgrimage of pain. She'd walk past the station, her eyes involuntarily drawn to the bench where Ethan once waited for her, a warm coffee in his hand, and a smile that made her believe love was simple. She tried so hard to forget, to erase him from the map of her life, but the city had a memory of its own. Every street corner, every gust of wind, seemed to whisper his name. It was a constant, haunting echo in the symphony of urban life. Her father, a man of few words, never spoke of it again after that final tear-filled conversation. Perhaps he thought she had moved on, that the wound had scarred over. Or maybe he just didn't see the way her hands would tremble, ever so slightly, whenever she heard a train whistle slicing through the distant air. He didn't see the shadow that passed over her eyes, the one that held the weight of a promise unkept, a future stolen. For him, life went on. For Maya, it was stuck on a loop, forever replaying their last goodbye. Then, one night, drawn by a force she couldn't name, she found herself back at the station. The rain was falling, just as it had on that last night, a cold, persistent drizzle that soaked through her coat. She stood on the same platform, in the very same spot where their world had ended. The digital clock on the wall blinked a merciless 11:47 p.m. The last train was about to depart, a symbol of finality she knew all too well. She closed her eyes, and in the darkness, the memories flooded back. She could almost feel his touch, the gentle way he used to tuck a stray strand of hair behind her ear. She could hear his voice, a low and hopeful murmur saying, "One day, Maya. One day, when it's just us." But one day was a fairy tale, a distant shore they would never reach. The reality was this cold, empty platform. As the train doors hissed open, a gust of cold air rushed out, brushing against her face. It felt sharp, clean, like an undeniable truth. And in that moment, something shifted inside her. For the first time since he left, she didn't cry. The well of her tears had finally run dry. Instead, she whispered into the empty, rain-soaked night, a message for a ghost she knew would never hear it. "You kept your promise, Ethan. You didn't look back." And with those words, a strange sense of peace settled over her. She turned away from the platform, away from the departing train, and started walking home, letting the rain wash over her, not in sorrow, but in acceptance. But stories rarely have just one side. Somewhere miles and miles away, in a city just as drenched in rain, Ethan sat alone in a dimly lit apartment. He was staring at the same kind of storm through his window, watching the raindrops trace lonely paths down the glass. On the table beside him lay a photograph of Maya. It was folded and refolded, its edges worn soft from countless nights just like this one. He picked it up, his thumb tracing the outline of her smile, a smile he hadn't seen in what felt like a lifetime. He whispered into the profound silence of his room, a confession to the shadows. But I never stopped. The city slept on, oblivious. The rain continued to fall, washing the streets clean, and their love, forbidden, unfinished, and impossibly deep, lived on. It existed quietly, breathing in the spaces between two hearts that still remembered, two souls that were forever bound by the memory of a last train. 5 years. Have you ever wondered what happens when you run into the one that got away? Not in a coffee shop, not at a party, but in the one place where it all ended? The place that still haunts your quietest moments. What if you saw them, standing right there, and you had one last chance to say something, or to say nothing at all? 5 years had passed. The city had transformed itself, a sprawling canvas of new skyscrapers and bustling cafes where silence once lived. Even the old train station, the stage for their final act, now gleamed under a fresh coat of modernity. But some places hold on to their ghosts, don't they? They keep them safe, tucked away in the echoes of footsteps and whispered goodbyes. Maya walked through the grand concourse, the sharp click of her heels a stark contrast to the soft, shuffling steps she had taken all those years ago. She was different now. The long hair he used to run his fingers through was cut short, framing a face that had learned to mask its sorrows. Her eyes, once wild with unshed tears, were calmer. Her heart, well, it wasn't healed, but it had learned to beat steadily again. A scar, not a wound. She wasn't here to chase memories. It was just a layover, a brief stop on her way to a business trip. A practical, logical reason to be in a place filled with so much impractical, illogical history. But then, a familiar voice, digitized and impersonal, echoed through the vast hall. Train 9 arriving in 5 minutes. Her breath hitched. Her carefully constructed composure threatened to crack. Train 9. The last train. His last train. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around, to walk away, to retreat back into the safety of her new life. It was just a coincidence, a cruel twist of fate. But a part of her, a fragile, stubborn part that still remembered the feeling of rain on her skin as she waited for a promise that was never meant to be kept, made her turn. Her feet, seemingly with a will of their own, carried her toward the platform. And that's when she saw him. He was older, the years having etched new lines around his eyes. He seemed a little thinner, as if he'd been carrying a weight she couldn't see. But his eyes, they were the same, unchanged. Those were the eyes that had looked at her with a universe of love, and then, with a devastating finality, had told her, "I love you, but I can't stay." He stood at the edge of the platform, a simple suitcase in his hand, a modern-day traveler just like any other. Yet, he stared out at the empty tracks as if he was searching for something, as if the cold steel rails held the answers to all the questions that time had stubbornly refused to answer, as if he was still looking for a different ending. And then, it happened. Their eyes met, a collision across the crowded platform. It lasted for no more than a heartbeat, but in that single, suspended moment, 5 years collapsed into nothing. The bustling crowd, the station announcements, the city hum, it all faded into a silent, private world that belonged only to them. There were no words, no hesitant smiles, no cinematic swell of music. There was only silence. But it was a profound silence, the kind that holds the weight of everything two people once were. It held their first laugh, their shared secrets, the rainy afternoons, the arguments, the promises, and the single shattering goodbye. It was all there, hanging in the space between them. The loud screech of metal on metal broke the spell. The train arrived, its doors hissing open like a final impatient sigh. He took a step forward, then hesitated. His body turned slightly back toward her, a silent question in his posture. For a split second, she thought he might do it. He might break that old, unspoken promise. He might cross the platform, close the distance, and rewrite their history. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating, but Maya knew. She knew this wasn't a movie. This was life. Gently, almost imperceptibly, she shook her head. A single tear, a traitor to her composure, shimmered under the bright station lights. She mouthed the word, a whisper only he could understand across the distance and the noise. "Go." And he did. He turned, stepped onto the train without looking back, and was swallowed by the crowd inside. As the train began to pull away, a slow, lumbering beast carrying him away from her for the second and final time, Maya let out a breath she felt she had been holding for 5 years. It wasn't a gasp of sorrow. It was a long, slow exhale. The kind that feels like a definitive goodbye, but also, strangely, like peace, like acceptance. She didn't cry this time. There were no frantic sobs, no desperate plea to the universe. Because in that moment, watching the red tail lights of the train disappear into the darkness, she finally understood. Love doesn't always have to end in a happily ever after. It doesn't always mean forever. Sometimes, the most profound love stories end not with a reunion, but with a quiet mutual understanding, an acknowledgement that what they had was real, beautiful, and complete, even in its incompletion. She turned her back on the tracks, the empty space where the train had been. She walked away from the platform, out of the station, and into the bright, indifferent lights of the city night. And for the first time in 5 long years, she didn't look back. She was finally moving forward. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, let me know in the comments below. We all have a last train story of some kind. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories about the complexities of life and love. See you next time.